The heated moment unfolded on live television, catching everyone off guard and sending shockwaves through the audience. The situation quickly escalated, with one of the individuals involved showing clear signs of frustration, while the other, seemingly caught off guard, tried to maintain composure. What began as a typical interaction quickly morphed into something more intense as emotions ran high and the tension between the two became undeniable. What made this confrontation especially gripping was the rawness of the exchange. It was unfiltered, unscripted, and entirely unanticipated by those watching at home. In the early moments, everything seemed relatively normal. Both figures, well known for their on-screen charisma and long-lasting careers, appeared to be engaged in what seemed like a typical conversation for a televised event. But as the dialogue unfolded, it became clear that things weren't as simple as they initially appeared. One of the men began to express his growing impatience, his body language shifting from casual to confrontational. His tone became more pointed, and his words, though carefully chosen, carried a weight that suggested deeper dissatisfaction. The other, clearly caught off guard, initially attempted to deflect the tension with humor, perhaps as a way of diffusing the situation. But the growing frustration from his counterpart made it impossible to ignore the mounting tension in the room. It was a clash of personalities, where one was more outspoken, fiery, and unwilling to back down, while the other tried to remain calm and composed, though it was becoming more difficult by the second. What was striking about the moment was the contrast in how each man handled the escalating situation. The first individual's reaction was unapologetically fierce. He didn't shy away from expressing his anger, letting his emotions take center stage. His eyes narrowed, his voice sharpened, and the frustration was evident in every word he spoke. The other man, visibly taken aback, seemed to realize that this was no ordinary disagreement. It was a moment of vulnerability, exposing an underlying tension that had clearly been building for quite some time, even though it had never been so publicly aired. As the exchange grew more heated, the atmosphere in the room shifted. The audience, initially unsure of what was happening, began to sense the drama unfolding. The body language of both men told a story of its own. The one who was more confrontational leaned in, his presence demanding attention, while the other recoiled slightly, his attempts to maintain composure becoming more strained. It was almost as though a power struggle had emerged right before everyone's eyes, and neither was willing to give up ground. The most striking element of the encounter was the sheer unpredictability of it all. The two had a history, yes, but it had never seemed so volatile. While tensions had simmered over the years, there was never any indication that it would explode into something so visceral and public. The clash wasn't just a personal disagreement, it felt almost symbolic of a broader clash of egos and ideologies. One individual seemed intent on asserting dominance, while the other tried to balance out the scales with restraint. As the confrontation reached its peak, there was a moment of silence, a brief lull in the chaos. For just a second, it seemed as if the two might come to an understanding, or at the very least back down from their positions. But that didn't happen. The silence was only temporary, and soon the fury resumed, this time even more intense than before. The exchange became a testament to the power of raw emotion, where words became less important than the message being sent. That one of them was not going to stand for being disrespected or dismissed, no matter the cost. What made the moment even more significant was that it was all happening in real time, in front of cameras and an audience. The stakes were high because neither man could control the narrative once the exchange had gone public. The cameras captured every gesture, every expression, and every word, ensuring that nothing was left to the imagination. The raw emotion displayed on camera couldn't be undone, and the aftermath was destined to be just as explosive as the confrontation itself. As the moment played out, viewers at home were left to process the shock of what they were witnessing. This wasn't some scripted performance or carefully crafted drama. It was real, visceral, and intensely personal. What made it even more riveting was that both men, so accustomed to public scrutiny and the spotlight, were now exposed in a way that few could have predicted. This wasn't just another television moment, it was a raw, unfiltered look into the human experience, where pride, frustration, and vulnerability collided. The impact of the incident was undeniable, as it quickly gained traction across social media platforms, becoming a viral sensation in a matter of hours. What began as a tense moment during a televised event turned into an internet phenomenon, with the footage being shared, reposted, and discussed by millions. As the clip spread, it didn't just circulate among fans of the two individuals involved, but it caught the attention of a broader audience who may have never previously followed their careers. The incident became a cultural moment that transcended its original context, sparking widespread conversation on social media, news outlets, and online forums. The viral nature of the footage was immediate and intense. Within minutes, people were commenting on the raw emotion displayed, the intensity of the exchange, and the sheer surprise of witnessing such an outburst. In an age where social media has the power to amplify even the smallest moments, this event became a perfect storm for virality. The clip was shared across platforms like Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook, where millions of users viewed it, reacted to it, and added their own commentary. Memes, parodies, and reaction videos soon followed, each adding to the narrative and ensuring that the story reached even more people. The viral spread wasn't limited to a single platform or demographic. People from all walks of life weighed in, sharing their own thoughts on the matter. Some took to Twitter to express shock and disbelief at the confrontation, while others on Reddit dissected every detail, from the body language of both individuals to the tone of their voices. The footage wasn't just a fleeting moment. It sparked intense discussions about pride, ego, and the power dynamics at play between two Hollywood heavyweights. It was as though people were not just reacting to the confrontation itself, but also speculating about the deeper motivations behind it. The viral spread also prompted many to reflect on the personalities of the two men involved. Longtime fans of their work began to discuss the underlying tensions that may have been present for years, but never surfaced in such a public way. Some argued that the event was a long time coming, pointing to previous interviews or interactions that hinted at underlying issues. Others questioned whether the tension was the result of a single, isolated incident, or whether it was a culmination of a much longer-standing frustration. Regardless of the interpretation, the moment had become more than just a heated argument. It had evolved into a social media spectacle that left people with more questions than answers. What also contributed to the viral nature of the moment was the widespread reaction from celebrities and public figures. Many took to their own social media accounts to comment on the event, sharing their thoughts or offering humorous takes on the situation. Some offered their support for one side, while others chose to remain neutral, but the discussions online took on a life of their own. Fans began to divide themselves into factions, with each side defending their favorite in what became an unofficial battle between two cultural icons. The internet has always had a tendency to turn such moments into larger-than-life events, and this one was no exception. The viral nature of the incident also highlighted the ever-growing influence of digital media in shaping public perception. In the past, such an exchange might have remained a brief blip on the radar, only discussed by those who witnessed it firsthand. Today, however, the ability for a single moment to be captured, shared, and commented on by millions ensures that nothing remains private for long. The reach of social media means that a brief incident can be transformed into a global discussion within hours, and this was exactly what happened in this case. The video had gone from a tense exchange between two individuals to a worldwide talking point, amplified by the constant loop of reposts, reactions, and retweets. As the days went on, the viral video continued to gain traction, with mainstream media outlets picking up the story and covering it in greater detail. What initially began as a small clip had now become a cultural touchstone, with even news anchors and talk show hosts weighing in on the situation. The viral moment had moved beyond the realm of social media and into the broader conversation of pop culture. It was no longer just about the two men involved. It had morphed into a larger discussion about celebrity feuds, personal conflict, and the nature of fame itself. It was a reminder of how quickly something can go viral in the digital age and how even the most seemingly private moments can become public spectacles. In the midst of all this, the exchange itself began to take on a symbolic meaning. It wasn't just a personal argument. it was seen as a reflection of larger cultural themes. The viral spread of the incident led to discussions about authenticity, vulnerability, and the pressures of living life in the public eye. What people were really responding to wasn't just the drama itself, but the way in which the two men had, in their own way, exposed their most human sides. The incident became a mirror for the audience, reflecting their own frustrations, expectations, and emotional reactions in a way that few moments in the public eye could achieve. For years, the show stood as a rare daytime platform where a spectrum of voices could be heard. From political commentary to pop culture discussions, it managed to blend gravitas with relatability, offering viewers a rotating panel of opinions that reflected a range of ideologies. Viewers tuned in not only for the news or celebrity gossip, but for the dynamic interplay of differing viewpoints. This balance, while sometimes tense, gave the show its distinctive character. It was a place where disagreement wasn't just tolerated but encouraged, structured, respectful, and occasionally fiery. Recently, however, that dynamic has been shifting. What once was a panel built on contrast has begun to lean into a particular rhythm, one where ideological alignment feels more like a prerequisite than a coincidence. While political discourse has always been a part of the program's DNA, there has been a growing perception among longtime viewers that the show is moving away from discussion and toward monologue. The diversity of opinion, once a source of strength, now often feels secondary to a unified message. This evolution has not gone unnoticed. Critics and viewers alike have begun to question whether the show has lost sight of its original purpose. It was never intended to be an echo chamber. Its success relied on the tension between different viewpoints, the occasional clash that exposed underlying truths and prompted audiences to think critically. Yet more and more, that clash has been replaced by a kind of ideological consensus. This shift, subtle at first, has grown more pronounced with each season, and particularly with the inclusion of guests who dominate the narrative rather than contribute to a conversation. The recent controversy only amplified these concerns. What was once dismissed as a gradual editorial trend suddenly felt like a dramatic rebranding. Audiences found themselves watching not a balanced exchange, but a one-sided discourse with minimal pushback or counter-argument. In that moment, the show's identity crisis came into full view. Was this still a talk show in the traditional sense, or had it morphed into something closer to a platform for advocacy? The answer, it seems, depends on who you ask. For some, the shift represents a bold commitment to speaking truth to power, even if it comes at the cost of balance. For others, it is a betrayal of the show's foundational premise. Those in the latter group point to the absence of meaningful dissent. During controversial segments, the lack of alternative framing, and the tendency for co-hosts to retreat rather than challenge dominant narratives. It's not just what is being said, it's what isn't being questioned. This reorientation is also reflected in the show's guest selection. Increasingly, there is a trend toward booking individuals who reinforce a specific ideological line, rather than complicating or broadening it. Where once there might have been a range of voices, journalists, activists, entertainers with varying perspectives, there is now a pattern of guests who seem chosen not for the complexity they bring, but for the certainty they deliver. Certainty is powerful, especially in emotionally charged times, but it is not a substitute for dialogue. That change in tone has consequences. When a show that once thrived on the vitality of disagreement begins to prioritize alignment over variety, it risks alienating viewers who come for the clash of ideas, not the comfort of confirmation. These viewers aren't necessarily seeking neutrality, they're seeking engagement. They want to see arguments unfold, perspectives challenged, and ideas interrogated. When that disappears, so does much of what made the show compelling in the first place. Within the media landscape, this trend isn't unique. Many shows, podcasts, and digital platforms have increasingly catered to specific ideological audiences in pursuit of loyalty and clarity. But in doing so, they often sacrifice breadth. This is particularly problematic for daytime television, which historically has served a broad, multi-generational, and politically diverse audience. It's not niche content, it's mass communication. And when mass communication becomes unipolar, its reach inevitably contracts. Internally, producers may view this evolution as a natural response to a shifting cultural climate, one where neutrality is seen by some as complicity, and where taking a stand is valued over playing mediator. But there is a difference between taking a stand and eliminating the opportunity for debate. The former can exist within a pluralistic framework. The latter cannot. As such, the challenge for the show now is not whether it will survive this moment. It almost certainly will, but whether it can restore the complexity and curiosity that once defined it. Without those qualities, the show risks becoming predictable, and in television, predictability is often the beginning of irrelevance. In the whirlwind of commentary that followed a highly charged episode of the show, a curious piece of satire emerged and quickly gained traction online. The story suggested that a legendary film icon, known for his grizzled demeanor and no-nonsense attitude, had intervened during the segment and forcibly removed the guest from the set. It was the kind of tale that seemed just plausible enough to momentarily suspend disbelief. After all, the image of this cinematic tough guy stepping into a real-life media storm felt satisfying, an ideal collision between fantasy and reality. Of course, the scenario was entirely fictional. There was no dramatic confrontation, no on-set removal, and no moment where the show was rescued by an outsider. But the spread of the story said something far more interesting than the story itself. It reflected a cultural hunger for narrative clarity in the face of a chaotic and polarizing media event. When audiences are overwhelmed by confusion, frustration, or disillusionment, satire often becomes a release valve. It offers a simplified, stylized version of events that capture emotional truths, even if they diverge from factual ones. This particular fiction served as both critique and coping mechanism. In portraying a hardened outsider stepping in to restore order, it gave voice to those who felt that the show had lost control. The idea of someone crashing the set and cutting through the noise, metaphorically or otherwise, played into a desire for accountability, something viewers felt was lacking during the actual broadcast. It imagined a moment of justice, however exaggerated, that the real episode failed to deliver. The use of a well-known figure as the protagonist in this imagined showdown also highlights how pop culture and public discourse often blur together. People project values onto celebrities, seeing in them avatars for their frustrations, ideals, and grievances. When traditional structures like talk shows no longer feel like neutral arenas for conversation, audiences turn to myth-making. In this case, the myth was of the outsider who doesn't bend to media etiquette, who calls out hypocrisy, who demands order amid chaos. The popularity of the satire also underscores how disenchanted many viewers have become with the direction of mainstream television. When a fictional scenario gains more traction than the actual event, it suggests a breakdown in trust. Viewers begin to believe that dramatized fiction might be closer to emotional reality than the polished, filtered version presented on screen. They embrace exaggeration not because they are gullible, but because they are searching for stories that resonate more deeply with their lived experience of the moment. Moreover, the widespread sharing of the story wasn't just about amusement, it was about protest. It allowed people to express dissatisfaction indirectly. Rather than confronting the producers, hosts, or network directly, they could share the fictional account as a kind of inside joke, a knowing wink to others who felt similarly. It became a shorthand for discontent, a meme with an edge. The laughter it generated was tinged with disappointment, and the absurdity of the tale served to highlight the absurdity they felt had occurred in reality. Media analysts have long observed the power of satire to shape public understanding, especially in times of heightened political and cultural tension. When people feel unheard or misrepresented, they often turn to humor, parody, and fabrication to reclaim some sense of control. In this case, the outlandish narrative became a lens through which to critique not just the guest's conduct, but the show's editorial choices, the host's passivity, and the broader media ecosystem that allowed the moment to unfold unchecked. Even as the story was debunked, it lingered in comment sections and message boards. It became a kind of folktale for the digital age. Not because anyone truly believed it happened, but because many wished it had. In doing so, it revealed more about audience psychology than about the actual program. The story was a mirror, reflecting collective dissatisfaction with how the real event had been handled. It exposed a desire for decisive action, for someone to step in and say what many viewers were thinking, but felt no one on the show had the courage to articulate. In the end, the satire accomplished what the original broadcast had not. It unified viewers, if only briefly, in their response. Whether they saw it as comedy, commentary, or catharsis, they recognized the deeper truth beneath the fiction. That is the power of narrative, and in this case, the fictional version of events proved more emotionally satisfying than the real one. It didn't need to be true to feel true, and sometimes, that's all it takes for a story to take hold. In the fallout of this extraordinary broadcast, what remains isn't just a moment of on-air tension or a viral social media flare-up. It's a deeper question about the evolving role of public platforms, audience expectations, and the limits of discourse. The episode, with its sharp rhetoric, unchallenged monologue, and absence of balance, left a mark that extended beyond the studio. It challenged the foundational principles of the show, and forced both its producers and its audience to reflect on what kind of conversation daytime television should foster. The controversy didn't simply arise from a single guest's behavior, but from the show's failure to maintain the equilibrium that once defined it. By allowing the tone of discourse to tip so far into the realm of unchecked ideology, the program exposed a vulnerability, the erosion of boundaries that once safeguarded its integrity. This was not about differing viewpoints or political friction. Those are to be expected and even welcomed. Instead, the issue stemmed from the one-sidedness of the exchange and the lack of accountability within the space where that exchange occurred. Ratings declines and viewer dissatisfaction weren't just about one incident. They were a symptom of a broader fatigue. Audiences increasingly seek authenticity, plurality, and substance. When a space that claims to value open dialogue veers into ideological sermonizing, the credibility that sustains it begins to fracture. And when satire fills the vacuum of leadership or balance, it's a sign that the public has begun to lose faith in the systems designed to inform and entertain them. Television, especially daytime talk, holds a unique place in American culture. It serves as both mirror and molder, reflecting public opinion while shaping it in real time. For many, these shows are part of daily rituals, spaces for shared reflection, laughter, and debate. When that experience is disrupted by moments that feel more like political theater than conversation, it doesn't just alienate. It breaks the spell that holds a community of viewers together. The fictional story of an outsider stepping in to restore order resonated not because people believed it, but because they wished someone had taken control. In that fiction, they found clarity, accountability, and strength, all the things they felt the real moment lacked. That longing speaks volumes about the expectations viewers place on media and the emotional contracts they form with the personalities and platforms they invite into their lives. As the show moves forward, it faces a decision point. Will it continue down a path that privileges ideology over inquiry, dominance over dialogue? Or will it reestablish itself as a forum where difference isn't feared but encouraged, where a tough conversation can happen without turning into a monologue? The answer to that question will determine not only its future, but its relevance in an era when trust, more than ever, is hard-earned.